Welcome to the Awaken podcast. I'm Rana Abihayla.
And I'm Manish Pole.
On this third episode, we're honoring Guru Purnima.
Yeah.
Celebrating the relationship between the teacher and the student. We'll be addressing this from different perspectives, from the ancient to the modern, the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna, from an Indian philosophy perspective, from, let's say, the Bible, the East, the West, Jesus and his disciple, from a psychology perspective, Freud and Jung, and we'll address how this relationship is designed and what light it brought to the student himself and how they've addressed it specifically. As we start our conversation, I think it would be interesting to explain what is Guru Purnima and where does the word Guru actually come from.
Welcome to all our scholar practitioners, our lifelong learners. Today is the day that marks wisdom traditions and transmission. The word Guru, as we've discussed multiple times, Gu, darkness, Ru, light, someone who takes us from darkness to light. I lived with my Guru for 7 years, from 2003 to 2010, and Guru Purnima used to be the most magical day of the year for us in that tradition. And Guru Purnima, to answer the question, begins with an old tradition in India. All cultures around the world value wisdom transmission, as we'll discuss. Guru Purnima per se has two sources of origin. One is we honor Ved Vyas, who compiled the entire Vedas, the Mahabharata, the Puranas. Bhagavad Gita is a part of Mahabharata. He's the greatest scholars and the greatest transmitters of ancient wisdom in the Vedic tradition. If not for Ved Vyas, we wouldn't have had all this beautiful living culture. So we honor him. It is said that he was born on the full moon of the Ashada month, which is between June to July. The other way of looking at it is that Adi Yogi is another name for Shiva. He started to teach. He faced the south. He started to teach to the 7 Saptarishis, and because he started to teach, he became the first guru. So we respect that. It happened on the full moon night of this month.
I think it's also a very special day and night celebration from a Buddhist tradition.
Exactly. It's considered that the Buddha started to teach his first Dharma lectures in Sarnath, as we visited,
after
on
he
this
reached
night.
enlightenment. Correct, yeah. Why in particular, what does it represent in particular? Why Guru Purnima? Purnima as a full moon, the Guru is being honored. What happened on that day? Do we link it to the story from the Gita where Krishna comes and shares his wisdom, helping Arjuna come out of his fears, his insecurities, if I may say, and guiding him. He moves away from being the cousin, the relative, and he takes over all the position or the role of the teacher and the guide on this journey. Is that fair to say that this is where the whole celebration or heritage comes from?
Not exactly for Guru Purnima. Guru Purnima, as we said, is Adi Yogi, Ved Vyas or Buddha. But as you said, the Krishna-Arjuna relationship is very unique because they're friends, they're cousins. But you've all seen the Kurukshetra battlefield, he's in the chariot. As Arjuna, the mightiest warrior, sees that he's going to be killing people who are dear to him in some way, he has a moment of moral cowardice. And at this point, Krishna starts to teach him. There comes a moment, and this is very significant, where Arjuna surrenders to Krishna's vast repertoire of spiritual wisdom. In that moment, he's no more a student, he's no more a friend or a cousin, and he becomes a student. So that is a very significant thing that we look at in the Guru Shishya tradition, that it requires a complete surrender to be able to absorb wisdom and knowledge.
So in this case, it's fair to say that the Guru has taken the student from darkness to light.
Yes.
The reason why I'm mentioning this is the different relationship from teacher to student that we'll be discussing in a bit are also different in the way they are seen. Tommy feels involved in the conversation.
A third host. Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of the times we think that spiritual wisdom is all about words, but it is a transmission and not necessarily just certain concepts being shared. That would be the role of a teacher. Like me, I've been a teacher for over 2 decades. The word for that is acharya, not guru. Guru is somebody who's qualitatively different and who's able to ignite a passion. The soul comes alive in the seeker and not merely just information.
So that reminds me very much of the relationship between Shams and Rumi. The way I see it is that Rumi went from being a theologist, a scholar, and in different other ways, but was not yet a mystic poet as we all know him today. Would that also be a celebration in the way?
Yes.
Krishna-Arjuna.
Exactly.
Shams.
Exactly.
Rumi.
Every tradition has this lineage of teacher to student. In the case of Shams was this wild mystic who was actually looking for another soul to pass on knowledge to, wisdom to. And he encounters Rumi, at which point Rumi is a scholar, just like if you were to put yourself in his shoes. At the age of 40 plus, he's got a great career. He teaches, the whole town is respecting of him in Konya. And suddenly he poses a question to him. He says, who's greater, is it Babajid or Muhammad? Now, it seems like an idiotic question because obviously the answer from a sort of doctrine perspective is clear. But the way it is framed, suddenly Rumi understands that this has to be explored through experience, and with all his knowledge and scholarliness, he still doesn't have an intimate inner experience. That is the critical factor. 100%. That you can go to many teachers, you can read many books, and you can know about, but you may not have an inner experience. That would define a guru shishya. So we use the word teacher, disciple, a person who's willing to discipline their whole life to be able to absorb wisdom and not just merely learn. Then the relationship begins. Then what Rumi does spectacularly is he's willing to let go of his stature in society. He's willing to drop everything he's attained to then become a mystic through the art of dance, silence, and the relationship with Shams. It's very beautifully described and scorned in the traditions of the Middle East. And then the magical thing happens where Shams leaves, not knowing, we don't know whether he was killed or whether he just left. And then that longing starts for Rumi. And he realizes that Shams doesn't represent an external teacher, but the inner longing in him. And that is his final liberation unto poetry, unto mysticism.
Yeah, eventually the teachings are not always resonating on the spot. It takes a lot of time for someone to experience them, to understand them. The messages are laid down out there for them to just pick them up. And whenever, as we say, a message of enlightenment or clarity of the purpose of where we're going actually is the important thing. That a teacher actually is leaving the student to discover what is meant for them.
So we say this in
it on them, right? So
Absolutely.
when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
And when the student is ready, the teacher disappears. So let us know which of those you resonate with, or both of those statements.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see the difference from the different culture, the different times also, from the perspective that we've shared so far. In your description earlier, you mentioned disciple, the word disciple.
Yeah.
And obviously, it resonates immediately in Christianity, the disciples of Jesus, in particular Simon and Andrew, and their relationship with their teacher or their master. So that's also another question I'll ask in a bit. But what are the differences in those three, for example, contexts? Right now, we are talking about a teacher and a student, but in different formality. We're talking about a guru and a student. And here, right now, in the context of Jesus, he is called a master in the Bible and his disciples.
Yeah.
So it's another form of.
Correct.
So how would you look at it in your experience? Because you have lived with your own guru.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that as well in
Sure.
a few.
So you go to university, you've been to university, you went to study business. So you were a student of business. You were a student of risk management. A disciple would be one who's willing to discipline their entire life to study a certain subject. So in the traditions of the world, it's an apprenticeship. So I went to live with my teacher thinking I'm going to study meditation, but I eventually lived and disciplined my entire life to absorb whatever was to be shared with me. And in those 7 years, beautiful process. For the first 1.5 years, I resisted. I thought I can study, read books, understand philosophy. Then it dawned on me after about 1.5 years that with all my reading, all my study, I had not changed even an inch. A moment of surrender happened, and the next 5.5 years, absolute bliss of transmission of wisdom. When the 7 years were over, it was time for me to leave, and so I left. But the point there is that that's the difference between a student, and that's why we use the word. There's another word called devotee, where you're devoted, but it's more from a belief perspective. A disciple is a beautiful word because you discipline your life to be in seeking. So that's why it's used with Jesus, I think.
Yeah.
Especially with Simon and Andrew.
Especially with Simon and Andrew, and then we see if we go through their journey and their lives and the work that they've done, it's also an ongoing progression for all of them, and they've marked their way. I'm shifting away a little bit, like I'm daydreaming right now because I'm trying to think where in the modern world nowadays where we live in, is there any kind of similarity, a relationship between a guru and a teacher that I'm referencing on. Once I figure it out, I'll let you know. But I'm just trying to understand that.
But there's this thing about Simon and Andrew which is very interesting, because when Jesus is 30, before he has worked any miracles, before any of his ministry has begun, Simon and Andrew are 45 years old at that point, and they are fishermen, they are fishing. And he walks past and he says, "Come join me to be fishers of men." In life, you very rarely go to wisdom to a younger person. He's 15 years, they're younger. But something in his presence, in his aura, in his voice, and something about him, they drop their nets and just go follow. Now, friends, how many of us would do that? How many of us would drop it? We are very interested in spirituality, but we want it on our terms. And maybe that's not the way. They're willing to just drop it, walk with him. They don't know anything about theology, philosophy. They're simple, uneducated folks. But their life transforms, and then they continue his ministry of wisdom. So it's really beautiful how, something must have been so amazing in that person that they're willing to drop their lives and follow.
Yeah. And also I feel the circumstances of life back then are very much different from the world we live in today. The uncertainty, the unknown. Today, the access to information, availability, learning, even technology and AI. No, we're not drifting from the conversation, but I think that the world we live in is very different from the world that was there. And in between that transition, we talk about also the role of the relationship in modern psychology, right?
Yeah.
It brings us to, obviously, Freud and Jung.
Yeah.
And how it's interesting to see, you ask the question, are we willing to leave everything and follow blindly or out of faith a teacher? In this context, Jung actually breaks the mold and steps away and does his own journey, of course, while respecting his teacher, Freud. And it's interesting to see that perspective within the modern non-spiritual, non-faith approach.
Rana, I graduated in psychology, and many years ago I visited Freud's office in Vienna. I have deep reverence for Freud, although my personal preference is for Jung. So when Freud started psychoanalysis, he almost thought of it as a modern religion of sorts. He was very sort of particular in the way, I mean, that's not the right word, but it was a system that was very different. It was a deep dive, and that's why we call him the father of modern psychology. He was very impressed by Jung's work as a young, upcoming psychologist, and he saw him as his heir apparent. They spent a lot of time working together, communicating. The first time they traveled from Europe to America, he was going to give lectures in a university in America. So they spent a lot of time on that ship voyage discussing everything in life. And then the story goes that Jung said that, shall we analyze each other's dreams? Freud had been known for analyzing people's dreams. And then Freud said, no, I will not risk my authority. And that moment suddenly changed Jung. He said that, oh, this person who he thought was a seeker of truth had his limitations of his ego, his authority being challenged, and so on and so forth. He was not willing to have his dreams analyzed by Jung. So there is where a lot of people today don't like the idea of the guru and so on and so forth, because there's too much of an authoritative figure. And because too many people, friends, as we all know, have abused that relationship. In the modern context, we have a distaste for absolute authority as it should be. So that begins the first break. Freud was never happy with Jung moving. So Freud was very scientific, secular in that sense, and he was not happy with Jung's delving into mysticism and spirituality, which he was very interested in. That rupture eventually led Jung on a journey, and as you rightly said, in the Indian or in any guru tradition, the ultimate tribute to the guru is when the student, the shishya, transcends. And Jung, through his work of individuation, transcends the gestalt, or rather the framework that Freud had built. He understood, he learned, but he went on his own journey, and that is so beautiful. And it also marks the way Aristotle and Plato.
Exactly, 100%. They are the two who actually break away from that and do their own journey.
Correct.
But since we're talking about the modern psychology, the modern way of living, coming from 20 years of healthcare consulting, I've been exposed to a lot of corporate framework, guidance, mentorship, and as you know now, again, I'm trying to find a similarity, a parallel to the age that I know right now, 21st century, the last bit of it in particular. Would let's say a mentor in different formality, whether it's from a business standpoint or whether it's a coach or a psychologist or therapist that's guiding you throughout your entire life journey, remain a point of reference. It's very difficult to find somebody who actually is willing to provide you the clarity but there is some sort of responsibility in that relationship. I know probably it's not fair to say that, let's say, a mentor in a business world is the one that's giving you the clarity you need, but probably in the modern days, I would say it's more fragmented instead of being a holistic life transformational journey.
I mean, it's very interesting because the guru is not just an expert, whereas the life coach, the business coach, or the mentor, so on and so forth, is an expert in a particular domain of life, and that transcends to many other domains of life, but not all. This is slightly different because, in my opinion, there are three things that are very important in the guru-shishya relationship or the teacher-disciple relationship. One, the teacher should have the caliber to be able to provide a spiritual process. Maybe we're talking from the spiritual side of things. They should have the love and the compassion to take care of that student, almost motherly. And the student should have 100% trust. That was the case in my own experience. At the end of a certain number of years, when for me it was time to leave, my teacher could still offer the first two. But I could not listen or could not anymore. I had to find my own path. So the three were not there. So I was out. So that way, all three are required. So to answer your question, does a life coach do it? No, because it's not a
Not a
spiritual
life coach.
process.
My question is not
A
a life
mentor.
coach. I'm just saying there are
Like a
different.
psychological mentor.
They all play a different role, and the reason why
Yes.
I'm mentioning this is that at some point when you're trying to sort out your life,
Yeah.
when you feel that you are in a state where you're ready to explore a bit more about who you are, is when you feel that everything is kind of in their place. You've kind of organized things into compartments. You've set your life, and then it's time for you to discover something that has always been in you, but you never had the time to really look into. And that's where the journey of spirituality maybe comes in. That's a big question. That's obviously very individual and personal.
It's interesting. It's interesting, but is that relationship all encompassing?
Is it in
Would be
one
the
man or
question.
many? That's
Yeah.
man-woman, even.
Man-woman, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. But would would you be willing to discipline all your life for that one thing? And will that relationship be rewarding in a way that takes care of every aspect of life? Right now, we go to different coaches for different aspects. You go to a
Not
health
just
coach,
coaches,
you go
it
to
can
a
be
a
anything.
mentor, you go to an uncle, you go to different things for different aspects.
Advisors.
But this is this particular spiritual transmission for which every aspect of life is part of one.
Correct. And looking at Socrates and Aristotle, what made their relationship so unique?
So Socrates had trained Plato, and Plato set up the academy. And Plato, he took on Socrates' work of the world of ideals. So Plato was very much focused on the idealistic world, that the world that we see here is based on the ideals of thought, the world of forms. And it's very interesting because he set up the academy in ancient Athens about 3 centuries before Christ. And when Aristotle went to study there, he was 17 years of age, and Plato was 60. And he stayed for about 20 years studying under him. But he was more driven to understand the world through the material aspect of the world, not just the ideas, but the real world, and to see it through sort of by looking at things, by understanding through perception and not only through intuition. So there's a very beautiful story that apparently once, so Plato's method was discussion, and they would go on long walks, students would be walking, and he would have question answers and discussions. So he draws out a circle on the earth and says that however well I've drawn it, it can never be perfect, because perfection only lies in the world of the ideal forms. So his idea was always that what we see is not, it's based on what is there underneath, which is perfect. He was almost spiritual in that sense. Yeah? And then it is said that Plato stepped into the circle, and he said that, so Aristotle stepped into the circle and told Plato that, but the point is that we are in this circle, and we got to figure it out from this as it is, imperfect. So it's thanks to Aristotle's work. Aristotle arguably has had the largest impact on
Correct.
human thought. Yeah? Everything that we do somehow took to him
Disrupted
and has been changed from him. But the idea that life is here and now, we got to figure it out with our imperfect circles and imperfect earths. Yeah, but if he had not done that, friends, if he had not broken away from his gurus, see, and that is the ultimate tribute to Plato, that he's taken the ideas, gone through it, and created his own. So that is
And that's
very
what makes
inspiring.
it very special.
Very
because
inspiring.
it's not like he just went off completely differently. He still paid tribute to
Yeah.
everything that his teacher meant to him.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
it's beautiful.
It's a big gift when you get a chance to live like that, or meet somebody who can be that kind of
A bridge between you and your inner self.
and your inner self.
Yeah.
100%. So in one word, if you were to recap the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna, I'll say probably Krishna gave clarity
He showed him his spiritual self, just like Jesus shows his spiritual self. And it allows Arjuna to accept, surrender, and to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus actually provides the calling.
Yeah.
He reminds them and he tells them that there's a calling for them that's beyond that. So I'm just trying to pick a word for every single teacher-student relationship.
Sure. It's a mission. Jesus is a man of action. He's on a mission to help. And you join the mission or no.
Shams would be probably the trigger for a complete transformation.
Yeah, for Shams it is not societal. It is one person completely transforming. An inner revolution.
I'm trying to find a word for Freud.
Freud is about going in, deep into inner seeking through subconscious.
Maybe. How describing his teaching, and Socrates, we've obviously...
Plato and Aristotle.
Sorry, Plato and Aristotle. Yeah. Interesting.
Friends, we wish you the very best this week as you explore what Guru Purnima means to you. If not anything, learning means something to all of us. And however you get the learning, from wherever you get it, you want to sort of imbibe learning. Let this day inspire us all to learning at great depth.
It would be also great to know if anyone in their lives right now is playing that role.
Yeah.
In any shape or form.
Absolutely.
Please share that with us. I'm very curious. I would love to know if there's anyone who is playing that role with you, but if there's anyone you think could be playing that role in your life. And also potentially, if you are playing that role with someone else, right? You could be impacting somebody's life. I know it's a bigger and wider spectrum from a relationship, from a guru to a student. But I feel like in life, we're all responsible in playing a role and sharing whatever wisdom we can with people around us.
Here's to a wiser world. Namaste.
Namaste.